There is a silent power that very few people understand. A power that frees your mind from overthinking, frees your heart from emotional pain, and frees your life from being controlled by others. Most people spend their lives reacting, worrying, chasing approval, fearing loss. But those who learn the art of deep detachment discover something extraordinary. Nothing outside of them has the power to disturb what is peaceful within them. When you detach wisely, you do not lose love, you lose fear. You do not lose connection. You lose emotional dependence. You do not escape life. You finally begin to live it with clarity and calm strength. In this journey, you will discover 7 powerful lessons that will help you detach so deeply that your peace becomes untouchable. 1. Attachment creates invisible chains. Many people believe attachment is love, but attachment and love are not the same. Love is pure, peaceful, and freeing, while attachment often becomes heavy, anxious, and fearful. Love allows space, but attachment clings tightly. Love brings calmness, but attachment often brings worry. When we confuse attachment with love, we unknowingly create suffering inside our own hearts. Attachment begins very quietly. At first, it feels comforting to depend on someone or something for happiness. We start believing that certain people, achievements, or outcomes are necessary for our emotional stability. We tell ourselves that we will feel peaceful only when things go exactly the way we want. But life rarely follows our expectations perfectly. Life is constantly changing, moving, and transforming. People grow, circumstances shift, and emotions rise and fall like waves in the ocean. When attachment becomes strong, fear also becomes strong. A person who is deeply attached to approval begins to fear criticism. A person who is deeply attached to success begins to fear failure. A person who is deeply attached to relationships begins to fear rejection or distance. Slowly, the mind becomes restless because it tries to hold tightly to things that are naturally unstable. Buddhist wisdom teaches that attachment creates invisible chains around the mind. These chains are not physical, yet they can feel very heavy. A person may appear free on the outside, but internally they feel controlled by expectations, opinions, and outcomes. They feel uncomfortable when things do not go according to their desires. Their emotional state rises and falls depending on how others behave or what results they achieve. The problem is not caring about life. Caring is natural and healthy. The problem begins when caring turns into dependency. Dependency makes the mind believe that peace cannot exist without certain conditions. It convinces us that we cannot feel okay unless everything goes exactly as we planned. This creates constant inner tension because reality rarely matches our perfect expectations. When the mind becomes attached, it constantly seeks reassurance. It looks for signs that everything is safe and secure. It wants certainty in an uncertain world. It wants permanence in a temporary life. But the nature of existence is change. Nothing remains exactly the same forever. Every moment is shifting, every situation is evolving, and every experience is temporary. Detachment does not mean becoming cold or distant. It does not mean avoiding relationships or refusing to care. Detachment means creating emotional balance. It means allowing yourself to care deeply while understanding that nothing external can fully define your inner peace. It means accepting that change is part of life and that stability must come from within rather than from outside circumstances. A detached mind understands that it can love people without becoming emotionally controlled by their actions. It can work toward goals without losing peace if results take time. It can listen to opinions without feeling shaken by judgment. Detachment allows you to remain centered even when life feels uncertain. When you practice detachment, you begin to release the pressure of needing everything to go perfectly. You stop expecting people to always behave exactly as you wish. You stop believing that your happiness depends entirely on external success. Instead, you begin to develop inner stability that does not easily break under pressure. You remind yourself that you can care without losing yourself. You can give without exhausting yourself. You can try your best without becoming desperate for a specific outcome. This mindset slowly removes the invisible chains created by attachment. True peace begins when your emotional stability is no longer controlled by temporary situations. When your peace comes from within, life's changes no longer feel as threatening. You become more flexible, more understanding, and more emotionally strong. You still participate fully in life, but you are no longer trapped by the fear of losing what you have. Detachment creates space inside the mind. In that space, clarity grows. In that clarity, wisdom appears. And through that wisdom, you begin to experience a peaceful strength that is not easily shaken by the changing nature of life. 2. You suffer more in your mind than in reality. One of the deepest truths taught in Buddhist wisdom is that much of our suffering is not created by reality itself, but by the stories the mind creates about reality. Many situations in life are neutral when they first occur, but the mind begins to interpret, imagine, exaggerate, and repeat the experience again and again. Slowly, the situation becomes heavier in our thoughts than it ever was in real life. A small misunderstanding becomes a long mental burden because the mind keeps replaying the moment repeatedly. A simple mistake begins to feel like a major failure because the mind continues to judge itself harshly. A single negative comment starts to feel overwhelming because the mind keeps remembering it again and again. In many cases, the pain we feel does not come from the moment itself, but from how long we keep holding that moment inside our thoughts. The human mind has a natural tendency to imagine worst-case scenarios. It tries to predict the future in order to protect itself, but sometimes this habit creates unnecessary fear. The mind begins to ask many questions that may never become reality. It creates worries about situations that have not happened. It builds tension based on uncertainty rather than truth. Slowly, the heart begins to feel heavy, not because something terrible has happened, but because the mind keeps expecting something terrible to happen. Many people spend hours thinking about conversations that already ended. They imagine what they should have said differently. They imagine how the other person may have interpreted their words. They imagine negative outcomes that may never appear. This cycle creates emotional exhaustion because the mind never truly rests. Even when the body is physically safe, the mind continues to feel pressure. Buddhist teachings remind us that thoughts are not always facts. Just because a thought appears in the mind does not mean it is true. Thoughts are often influenced by fear, past experiences, insecurities, and assumptions. When we automatically believe every thought, we allow the mind to control our emotions without question. Detachment helps create distance between you and your thoughts. Instead of immediately believing every idea that appears in your mind, you begin to observe your thoughts calmly. You begin to notice that thoughts come and go naturally, just like clouds passing through the sky. Some thoughts are helpful, but many thoughts are simply mental noise created by habit. When you detach from overthinking, you stop giving unnecessary importance to every mental story. You begin to understand that not every thought deserves your attention. Some thoughts only exist because the mind is used to worrying. Some thoughts only appear because the mind wants certainty in an uncertain world. But life does not always provide certainty, and learning to live peacefully without constant certainty is part of emotional maturity. The mind often magnifies small problems by continuously focusing on them. When attention remains fixed on a difficulty, the difficulty appears larger than it truly is. But when attention becomes balanced and calm, the The same difficulty may appear manageable and temporary. Detachment helps reduce the habit of mentally enlarging every discomfort. Another reason the mind creates suffering is because it resists uncertainty. The mind wants clear answers about the future. It wants guarantees that everything will go well. But the future cannot always be predicted. Trying to mentally control every possible outcome only creates anxiety. Detachment allows you to accept that uncertainty is a natural part of life. When you accept uncertainty, you stop forcing the mind to solve every unknown situation immediately. You allow life to unfold gradually. You give yourself permission to experience the present moment without constantly worrying about what might happen next. This creates a sense of mental spaciousness where peace can begin to grow. Overthinking also often comes from the desire to control how others perceive us. We worry about whether someone misunderstood us. We worry about whether someone is judging us negatively. We worry about whether we made the perfect impression. But constantly thinking about others' opinions creates emotional dependence. Detachment helps you understand that not every opinion defines your worth. A peaceful mind does not try to control every thought. Instead, it learns to gently release thoughts that do not serve emotional stability. Just as you would not hold on to every passing cloud in the sky, you do not need to hold on to every passing worry in the mind. Some thoughts are meant to pass naturally without becoming permanent concerns. When you practice detachment, you begin to notice a powerful shift. Situations that once created long periods of stress begin to feel lighter. You still experience emotions, but emotions no longer dominate your entire mental space. You allow yourself to feel without becoming overwhelmed by feeling. Detachment also helps you remain present. Instead of living in imagined futures or remembered pasts, you become more aware of what is happening now. The present moment often contains less suffering than the mind imagines. In the present, you are often safe, breathing, and capable of responding wisely. But when the mind travels constantly into imagined problems, peace becomes difficult to maintain. Learning to detach from overthinking does not happen instantly. It is a gradual practice of gently bringing the mind back to balance again and again. Each time you notice unnecessary worry and allow it to pass, the mind becomes slightly calmer. Each time you refuse to give energy to imagined fears, emotional strength increases. Over time, you begin to realize that many worries were never as important as they once appeared. Many fears never became reality. Many thoughts were simply temporary mental reactions that lost their power when you stopped feeding them attention. A detached mind understands that peace is not created by controlling every thought, but by choosing which thoughts deserve attention. When attention becomes selective, emotional life becomes lighter. The mind becomes quieter, clearer, and more stable. You begin to experience moments of calm that are not dependent on perfect situations. Even when small problems appear, they no longer create overwhelming pressure. The mind becomes more resilient because it no longer turns every small difficulty into a large emotional struggle. True freedom begins when the mind stops creating unnecessary suffering. Detachment allows you to live more in reality and less in imagined fear. When the mind learns to release unnecessary stories, inner peace begins to appear naturally and consistently. 3. Not everything deserves your emotional energy. One of the most powerful forms of detachment is learning where to invest your emotional energy and where to calmly step back. Many people feel constantly tired, not because they are doing too much physical work, but because their minds are reacting to too many unnecessary things. They respond to every comment, they worry about every opinion, and they feel affected by every small situation. Slowly, their inner peace becomes weak because their emotional energy is being pulled in too many directions. Emotional energy is one of the most valuable resources you have. Yet most people spend it carelessly. They give their attention to people who do not understand them. They give their reactions to situations that do not truly matter. They allow small events to disturb their mood for long periods of time. Over time, this habit creates mental exhaustion because the mind never truly rests. It is always alert, always reacting, always feeling pressured. Buddhist wisdom teaches that peace grows when we become selective with our reactions. Not everything deserves your anger. Not everything deserves your explanation. Not everything deserves your worry. Many situations in life are temporary, yet the emotional impact becomes long-lasting because the mind keeps revisiting the same moment repeatedly. When you react to everything, you give everything power over your peace. Every opinion begins to influence your confidence. Every criticism begins to affect your mood. Every misunderstanding begins to disturb your calmness. Slowly, you begin to feel controlled by the environment around you. Your emotions become dependent on how others behave, how situations unfold, and how perfectly life matches your expectations. Detachment teaches emotional discipline. It teaches you to pause before reacting. It teaches you to observe before responding. It reminds you that your reaction should not always be automatic. A wise mind does not respond to everything immediately. Instead, it calmly evaluates whether the situation truly deserves emotional involvement. Sometimes silence protects your peace better than explanation. Sometimes distance protects your energy better than engagement. Sometimes acceptance protects your stability better than resistance. Learning when not to react is just as important as learning how to respond wisely. Many people feel pressure to respond to every message quickly, to defend themselves in every disagreement, and to correct every misunderstanding. But constantly trying to manage how others perceive you creates emotional fatigue. It creates the illusion that your peace depends on being perfectly understood by everyone. In reality, not everyone will fully understand you, and not every misunderstanding needs correction. A deeply peaceful person does not try to win every argument. They do not try to explain themselves to those who are not willing to understand. They do not feel the need to react to every negative opinion. Instead, they preserve their energy for things that truly matter, such as personal growth, meaningful relationships, and inner balance. Detachment does not mean ignoring responsibilities or avoiding important conversations. It means recognizing which situations deserve your full attention and which situations deserve calm acceptance. Some discussions lead to growth, while others only lead to unnecessary tension. Some feedback helps improvement, while other criticism only creates distraction. When emotional energy is constantly spent on unimportant matters, there is little energy left for meaningful experiences. The mind becomes crowded with small concerns, leaving no space for clarity or creativity. But when emotional energy is protected, the mind becomes lighter and more focused. This clarity allows you to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. Many people react strongly because they feel the need to defend their identity at all times. They feel uncomfortable when others disagree with them. They feel threatened when someone questions their choices. But true confidence does not require constant defense. A stable mind does not need approval from everyone in order to feel secure. When you detach from the need to react to everything, your emotional world becomes calmer. Situations that once created frustration begin to feel less important. Opinions that once created insecurity begin to feel less powerful. You begin to recognize that not every situation deserves your mental attention. Protecting your emotional energy is not selfish. It is an act of wisdom. Just as you would not give your physical strength to unnecessary labor all day without rest, you should not give your emotional strength to unnecessary stress. Emotional energy must be used carefully because it directly affects the quality of your life experience. A person who constantly reacts becomes easily influenced by external conditions. But a person who responds selectively maintains inner stability even when the environment becomes challenging. Detachment allows you to maintain control over your emotional direction instead of allowing every external event to control you. Sometimes the strongest response is no response. Sometimes the most powerful action is calm observation. Sometimes the greatest strength is choosing peace instead of proving a point. Detachment gives you the freedom to choose your emotional priorities wisely. When you stop reacting to everything, you begin to notice how much unnecessary tension disappears. Conversations become simpler because you no longer feel the need to control every outcome. Relationships become healthier because you allow space for differences without feeling threatened. Your mind becomes quieter because it is no longer overloaded with small concerns. Emotional maturity grows when you understand that your peace is more valuable than temporary satisfaction from winning arguments or proving others wrong. The desire to always be right often creates unnecessary conflict. The desire to always be understood often creates disappointment. But the desire to remain peaceful creates stability that lasts much longer. Detachment also helps you become less affected by negative energy from others. Sometimes people project their frustrations, fears, or insecurities onto those around them. If you absorb every negative emotion directed toward you, your peace will constantly be disturbed. But when you practice detachment, you begin to see that other people's reactions often reflect their internal state rather than your true worth. Instead of absorbing negativity, you allow it to pass without deeply affecting you. Instead of reacting immediately, you give yourself time to respond thoughtfully. This creates emotional space where peace can remain strong even in uncomfortable situations. When emotional energy is used wisely, your inner world becomes more balanced. You feel less overwhelmed because fewer things are competing for your attention. You feel more stable because your emotions are not constantly shifting with every external event. This stability creates confidence because you trust your ability to remain calm even when life becomes unpredictable. Detachment helps you recognize that peace is not created by controlling everything around you, but by controlling how much influence external situations have over your inner state. When you stop giving emotional energy to everything, everything loses the ability to disturb you deeply. Gradually, you begin to experience a quiet strength that allows you to remain centered even when others become reactive. You listen without absorbing unnecessary negativity. You observe without feeling pressured to respond instantly. You participate in life without feeling emotionally overwhelmed. When emotional energy is protected, inner peace becomes stronger and more consistent. Your mind becomes clearer, your decisions become wiser, and your reactions become calmer. You begin to live with greater awareness, choosing carefully what deserves your attention and what deserves gentle release. Not everything deserves your emotional energy. Some things deserve your understanding, some things deserve your patience, some things deserve your silence, and many things simply deserve your peaceful detachment. 4. Acceptance reduces inner conflict. One of the biggest reasons the mind feels heavy is because it constantly argues with reality. We often create a mental image of how life should be, and when life moves differently, the mind begins to resist. We resist change, we resist endings, we resist mistakes, and we resist situations that do not match our expectations. This resistance quietly creates inner conflict, and inner conflict slowly disturbs our peace. Many people believe that peace will come only when everything goes exactly as planned. They believe that calmness will appear only when problems disappear completely. But life does not follow a perfect pattern. There will always be unexpected situations, unexpected delays, and unexpected changes. When the mind refuses to accept this truth, it creates tension because it is constantly fighting against something that already exists. Acceptance is one of the most powerful forms of detachment because it removes unnecessary mental struggle. Acceptance does not mean you agree with everything or like everything. Acceptance simply means you recognize what is real in the present moment. When you stop arguing with reality, the mind becomes lighter because it is no longer wasting energy trying to change what cannot be changed immediately. Many people create suffering by asking, "Why did this happen to me?" Or, "Why is life not going the way I expected?" These questions often do not create solutions. Instead, they create frustration because the mind becomes trapped in resistance. The more strongly we resist reality, the more painful the situation feels. Acceptance allows the mind to move from resistance toward understanding. Instead of asking why something should not have happened, acceptance asks how to respond wisely now that it has happened. This shift creates emotional strength because attention moves from complaining toward learning. Inner conflict often appears when expectations are rigid. When we expect everything to go smoothly, even small difficulties feel overwhelming. When we expect people to always behave perfectly, even small misunderstandings feel deeply disturbing. But when expectations become flexible, the mind becomes more prepared for change. Flexibility does not remove difficulty, but it reduces emotional shock. The mind becomes more adaptable, and adaptability creates resilience. A resilient mind can face challenges without losing balance completely. It can experience disappointment without losing hope. It can experience uncertainty without losing stability. Acceptance also helps reduce the fear of imperfection. Many people place strong pressure on themselves to avoid mistakes. They believe mistakes reduce their value, but mistakes are part of growth. Without mistakes, learning becomes limited. Acceptance allows mistakes to become lessons rather than sources of shame. When you accept that imperfection is part of being human, you begin to treat yourself with greater patience. Self-criticism slowly becomes self-understanding. Instead of feeling discouraged by every difficulty, you begin to see difficulty as part of the natural process of development. Acceptance also improves relationships because it allows space for others to be imperfect. When we expect others to behave exactly according to our preferences, disappointment becomes frequent. But when we accept that each person has their own perspective, communication becomes calmer, understanding becomes easier because expectations become more realistic. Inner conflict often grows when we try to control how everything unfolds. We try to control timing, results, and responses. But many aspects of life develop gradually. Some changes require patience. Some answers require time. Acceptance allows the mind to remain calm during these waiting periods. Waiting becomes less stressful when we understand that not everything must happen immediately. Some outcomes require preparation that we may not fully see yet. Acceptance allows trust to grow because the mind is no longer demanding instant clarity for every situation. Another important aspect of acceptance is releasing the habit of replaying the past repeatedly. Many people continue to mentally revisit past mistakes or regrets. They imagine different outcomes and wish events had unfolded differently, but the past cannot be changed by repeated thinking. Resistance toward the past only creates prolonged emotional discomfort. Acceptance allows the past to remain in the past. It allows lessons to remain while releasing unnecessary emotional weight. The mind becomes calmer because it no longer fights events that have already finished. Instead of carrying regret continuously, acceptance allows learning to replace self-blame. Acceptance also helps reduce anxiety about the future. The future always contains uncertainty. Trying to predict every possibility creates mental exhaustion. Acceptance allows you to prepare responsibly without demanding complete certainty. The mind becomes more peaceful because it trusts its ability to respond to future situations when they arrive. Acceptance does not mean giving up on improvement. It means improving from a place of calm awareness rather than from a place of emotional pressure. Growth becomes more sustainable when it is supported by patience rather than driven by fear. When acceptance becomes natural, emotional reactions become softer. Situations that once created intense frustration begin to feel manageable. Unexpected changes no longer create immediate panic. Instead, the mind pauses, observes, and chooses a thoughtful response. Acceptance creates space between experience and reaction. In this space, wisdom develops. When reactions are not immediate, they become more balanced. Balanced reactions create better outcomes because they are guided by understanding rather than impulse. Inner conflict decreases when the mind stops demanding perfection from life. Life includes both comfort and discomfort. It includes both clarity and uncertainty. It includes both success and challenge. Acceptance allows all of these experiences to exist without disturbing inner stability completely. Peace grows stronger when the mind stops arguing with every uncomfortable situation. Some experiences require patience rather than resistance. Some difficulties require understanding rather than frustration. Some situations require calm observation rather than immediate action. When acceptance becomes part of your mindset, emotional pressure decreases naturally. You begin to trust that not every moment needs to be controlled in order for life to move forward. This trust creates relaxation because the mind no longer feels responsible for managing everything perfectly. Acceptance allows you to remain present rather than constantly wishing reality were different. Presence creates clarity because attention is no longer divided between resistance and awareness. Clarity supports better decisions because thinking becomes calmer. A peaceful mind does not require life to always feel comfortable. It requires the ability to remain balanced even when comfort changes. Acceptance creates this balance because it allows flexibility instead of rigid expectation. When you accept reality as it is, you reduce the tension created by constant resistance. You allow yourself to respond wisely instead of reacting emotionally. You allow growth to happen naturally rather than forcing immediate results. Acceptance reduces inner conflict because it removes the need to fight every imperfection in life. It replaces pressure with patience. It replaces frustration with understanding. It replaces resistance with calm awareness. Through acceptance, the mind learns an important truth. Peace does not come from controlling every experience. Peace comes from learning how to experience everything with balance. 5. You cannot control everything. One of the greatest sources of inner tension comes from the desire to control everything around us. The mind often believes that peace will come only when situations unfold exactly as expected, when people behave exactly as we wish, and when the future becomes fully predictable. But life does not move according to our complete control. Life is constantly changing, constantly moving, and constantly presenting situations that we did not plan. From a very young age, the mind learns to seek certainty because certainty feels safe. We want reassurance that our efforts will succeed. We want guarantees that relationships will remain stable. We want confirmation that our future will be secure. This desire for control is natural, but when it becomes excessive, it creates anxiety. The more strongly we try to control everything, the more pressure we place on ourselves, because complete control is not possible. Many people experience stress not because life is always difficult, but because their expectations are rigid. They create a fixed image of how things should happen, and when reality moves differently, they feel disturbed. They try to control the timing of success, the opinions of others, the behavior of people around them, and even circumstances that are naturally unpredictable. Slowly, this habit creates frustration because reality rarely matches our expectations perfectly. Buddhist teachings remind us that suffering often arises when we resist the natural flow of life. Trying to control everything creates constant inner conflict because life includes uncertainty, change, and unpredictability. No matter how carefully we plan, there will always be situations that move beyond our influence. People will make choices we cannot control. Events will occur that we did not expect. Outcomes will sometimes differ from our efforts. Detachment teaches the difference between effort and control. Effort is healthy. Effort allows growth, improvement, and progress. Control, however, becomes unhealthy when it turns into the belief that we must manage every detail of life in order to feel peaceful. We are responsible for our actions, our intentions, and our choices, but we are not responsible for controlling every outcome. When we confuse effort with control, we begin to feel responsible for things that are not fully within our power. We feel personally affected by outcomes that depend on many external factors. We blame ourselves for events that could not have been fully predicted. We feel disappointed when people behave differently than expected. Slowly, the mind becomes heavy because it carries responsibilities that were never meant to be carried. A detached mind understands that control has limits. It understands that life is a combination of effort and uncertainty. We can prepare carefully, but we cannot predict every result. We can communicate honestly, but we cannot control how others interpret our words. We can act with kindness, but we cannot control how others respond to our kindness. When we try to control everything, we often create fear of imperfection. We become afraid of making mistakes because mistakes feel like a loss of control. We become afraid of uncertainty because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. But growth often requires stepping into situations that are not fully predictable. Learning requires accepting that not everything will go perfectly every time. Detachment allows the mind to relax its need for constant certainty. It allows us to focus on what we can influence rather than worrying about what we cannot change. We can influence our mindset, our effort, our attitude, and our decisions. We can choose patience, understanding, and calmness, even when situations feel uncertain. Trying to control everything also creates pressure in relationships. When we try to control how others think, behave, or respond, tension naturally appears. People feel uncomfortable when they sense pressure to meet expectations that limit their freedom. Healthy relationships grow when there is space for individuality, understanding, and natural development. Detachment does not mean becoming passive or careless. It means acting with sincerity while releasing the constant pressure of needing specific results. It means doing your best with wisdom and patience, while understanding that outcomes often depend on many factors beyond personal control. Many people delay their peace because they believe they will feel calm only after everything becomes perfect. They believe they will relax only after success becomes certain, after problems disappear, or after situations become completely stable. But life rarely becomes permanently perfect. There will always be challenges, adjustments, and new experiences. When peace depends on perfect control, peace becomes difficult to maintain. But when peace comes from acceptance, peace becomes stable even when circumstances change. Acceptance allows the mind to remain balanced even when life feels uncertain. Acceptance allows emotional strength to grow because the mind no longer resists reality constantly. A powerful shift occurs when you begin to understand that not everything needs to be controlled in order for life to move forward. Many positive outcomes develop naturally through patience, consistency, and openness. When the mind becomes less rigid, it becomes more adaptable. Adaptability creates resilience because the mind can adjust without feeling overwhelmed. Detachment also reduces the fear of unexpected change. When we strongly attach ourselves to one specific outcome, any difference feels like failure. But when we allow flexibility, we begin to see multiple possibilities. Some paths may appear difficult at first, but they often lead to growth that could not have been predicted. Learning to release excessive control also helps reduce overthinking. The mind no longer needs to calculate every possible scenario repeatedly. Instead, it learns to trust effort and allow time to reveal results gradually. This trust creates calmness because the mind is no longer constantly searching for guarantees. Life often becomes lighter when we focus on progress rather than perfection. Progress allows learning and adjustment. Perfection demands rigid control. Progress allows patience. Perfection creates pressure. When we release the need for perfect control, we become more open to learning from experience rather than fearing mistakes. A detached person still plans carefully, but they do not become emotionally broken when plans change. They still care deeply, but they do not become anxious when outcomes take time. They still take responsibility, but they do not carry unnecessary blame for things beyond their influence. Peace grows stronger when we stop arguing with uncertainty. Uncertainty is not always a problem. Sometimes uncertainty creates opportunity. Sometimes unexpected situations reveal strengths that we did not know we had. Sometimes life teaches wisdom through experiences we did not plan. When we accept that we cannot control everything, we begin to feel lighter. We begin to release unnecessary mental pressure. We begin to trust that effort, patience, and calm awareness can guide us even when situations are not fully predictable. Detachment allows us to give our best without losing emotional stability. It allows us to care deeply without becoming overwhelmed by fear. It allows us to move forward with courage, even when the path is not completely visible. True peace begins when we understand that life does not need to be completely controlled in order to be meaningful. Life only needs to be experienced with awareness, patience, and balance. When we release the constant need for control, we create space for wisdom, flexibility, and inner strength. A calm mind accepts effort as its responsibility and releases outcomes as part of life's natural movement. Through this balance, emotional freedom becomes possible. Through this freedom, peace becomes steady. You cannot control everything, but you can control how peacefully you respond to everything. And sometimes, that is more powerful than control itself. 6. Solitude strengthens inner stability. In a world that constantly encourages noise, connection, and continuous stimulation, many people begin to feel uncomfortable when they are alone. Silence feels unfamiliar, stillness feels strange, and solitude sometimes feels empty. But Buddhist wisdom teaches that solitude is not emptiness. Solitude is space, and within that space, inner strength quietly develops. Many people seek constant distraction because they feel uneasy when they are alone with their thoughts. They turn to conversations, entertainment, social media, or busy schedules in order to avoid silence. Yet when the mind is always occupied by external input, it rarely has the opportunity to understand itself. Without moments of quiet reflection, it becomes difficult to observe our true feelings, motivations, and patterns of thinking. Solitude allows the mind to slow down. When external noise decreases, internal awareness increases. Thoughts that were hidden beneath daily distractions begin to appear more clearly. Emotions that were ignored begin to express themselves gently. This awareness is not meant to create discomfort, it is meant to create understanding. Inner stability begins with self-understanding. When you understand how your mind reacts, what your heart values, and what truly brings peace, you begin to develop emotional independence. Emotional independence does not mean isolating yourself from others. It means your sense of stability does not disappear when you are not surrounded by constant validation or attention. Many people unknowingly depend on external interaction to feel secure. They feel uncomfortable when messages are not answered quickly. They feel uneasy when they are not receiving recognition. They feel uncertain when they are not constantly connected. This dependence weakens inner stability because peace becomes linked to external stimulation. Solitude helps remove this dependence. When you spend time alone, you begin to realize that your emotional balance does not need to rely on constant reassurance from others. You begin to feel comfortable in your own presence. You begin to trust your own thoughts. You begin to listen to your own intuition. Buddhist teachings often emphasize the importance of quiet reflection because clarity grows when the mind is not overwhelmed by external influence. When you step away from constant noise, your awareness becomes sharper. You begin to observe your thoughts without immediately reacting to them. You begin to notice patterns that were previously hidden by busyness. Solitude also helps you detach from comparison. When constantly surrounded by others' achievements, opinions, and lifestyles, the mind often begins to compare. Comparison creates pressure because it shifts attention away from personal growth and toward external measurement. Solitude allows you to focus on your own journey rather than constantly evaluating yourself through the lens of others. Inner stability grows when your sense of worth is not dependent on external comparison. You begin to appreciate progress that is meaningful to you, rather than progress that appears impressive to others. You begin to understand that every individual follows a unique path, and peace becomes easier when you respect your own pace. Spending time alone also strengthens emotional resilience. When you are comfortable in solitude, unexpected moments of loneliness become less frightening. When you trust your own company, you do not feel empty when external company is not available. This creates emotional flexibility because your peace does not collapse in the absence of constant interaction. Solitude provides an opportunity to reconnect with simplicity. Without constant stimulation, small experiences begin to feel more meaningful. A quiet walk, a calm breath, or a moment of stillness becomes noticeable. The mind begins to appreciate subtle details that are often ignored during busy routines. This appreciation creates gratitude, and gratitude creates contentment. Many people search for peace in distant places, believing that peace must be discovered through major change. But often, peace grows quietly in small moments of stillness. Solitude creates these moments. It allows the mind to rest from constant reaction. It allows the heart to release unnecessary tension. Another powerful benefit of solitude is clarity of direction. When constantly influenced by many voices, it becomes difficult to know which voice truly represents your own values. Opinions from society, expectations from others, and pressure from comparison can create confusion. Solitude gives you the opportunity to hear your own inner voice more clearly. When you regularly spend time in reflection, your decisions become more aligned with your true intentions. Instead of reacting impulsively to external pressure, you begin to respond thoughtfully. Your choices become more consistent with your personal values rather than temporary influence. Solitude also strengthens discipline. When you are able to remain peaceful without constant stimulation, you develop the ability to remain focused on meaningful goals. Distractions lose their power because your mind is not dependent on continuous entertainment. You become more capable of maintaining attention on what truly matters. Some people fear solitude because they associate it with loneliness. But solitude and loneliness are not the same. Loneliness is the feeling of missing connection. Solitude is the experience of connecting with yourself. Loneliness feels empty because attention is focused on absence. Solitude feels fulfilling because attention is focused on presence. When you learn to appreciate solitude, your relationship with yourself becomes stronger. You begin to treat your own mind with patience rather than criticism. You begin to observe your own emotions with compassion rather than judgment. This internal kindness creates emotional balance because the mind no longer feels pressured to meet unrealistic expectations. Solitude also helps you detach from the need for constant approval. When you are comfortable alone, you no longer feel anxious when recognition is delayed. You no longer feel uncomfortable when attention shifts elsewhere. Your confidence becomes quieter but stronger because it is built on self-understanding rather than external praise. Buddhist monks often spend extended time in silence, not because they reject the world, but because they seek deeper understanding of the mind. Through quiet observation, they develop stability that is not easily disturbed by external change. Their calmness is not created by perfect circumstances, but by inner clarity. You do not need to completely withdraw from society to experience the benefits of solitude. Even small moments of quiet reflection can strengthen inner stability. Taking time to observe your thoughts without distraction allows emotional tension to release gradually. Giving yourself permission to pause allows clarity to appear naturally. When solitude becomes comfortable, independence grows. You no longer feel pressured to constantly seek distraction. You no longer feel uneasy when external noise fades. Instead, you begin to appreciate stillness as a source of renewal. A stable mind is not created through constant activity. It is created through balanced awareness. Solitude allows the mind to organize itself without pressure. It allows emotions to settle naturally. It allows understanding to develop gradually. Inner stability becomes stronger when you know that your peace is available even when you are alone. This understanding removes fear of isolation. It removes pressure to constantly search for external reassurance. It creates confidence because you trust your ability to remain balanced regardless of external circumstances. When solitude strengthens inner stability, relationships also become healthier. You connect with others not from need, but from genuine appreciation. You communicate without fear of losing yourself. You give attention without expecting constant validation in return. Detachment grows naturally when solitude becomes familiar. You begin to realize that your emotional strength is not dependent on constant stimulation. Your peace is not dependent on constant company. Your stability is not dependent on constant reassurance. Through solitude, you begin to understand that peace is always accessible within you. It does not need to be chased through endless distraction. It only needs to be noticed through calm awareness. When the mind becomes comfortable in stillness, life feels less overwhelming. You begin to move through experiences with greater patience. You begin to listen more carefully. You begin to respond more thoughtfully. Solitude does not remove you from life. It prepares you to live more wisely. It strengthens your ability to remain calm, even when life becomes busy again. It creates a quiet confidence that allows you to move through the world without losing your center. Inner stability grows in silence, develops through reflection, and becomes strong through understanding. When solitude becomes a friend rather than a fear, peace becomes more consistent, more natural, and more deeply rooted within you. 7. True peace comes from within. Many people spend their entire lives searching for peace in external things. They believe peace will arrive when they achieve success, when they find the right relationship, when they gain recognition, or when life finally becomes stable and predictable. They believe peace is something waiting in the future, something that will appear once everything is perfectly arranged. But Buddhist wisdom gently reminds us that peace does not come from controlling the outside world. True peace begins when the inside world becomes balanced. External conditions are always changing. Success can rise and fall. Relationships can grow and shift. Situations can improve and become uncertain again. If peace depends only on external stability, peace becomes temporary. It appears for a short moment and disappears when circumstances change. This creates a continuous cycle of emotional ups and downs, where happiness depends on situations that cannot always remain constant. When peace depends only on external conditions, the mind becomes vulnerable. A small problem can disturb the entire emotional state. A small disappointment can remove feelings of calmness. A small misunderstanding can create deep frustration. This happens because the foundation of peace is placed outside, where nothing is guaranteed to remain the same forever. Buddhism teaches that lasting peace must be developed internally. When peace grows from within, it becomes more stable than any external condition. External situations may still change, but inner balance remains steady. The mind becomes less reactive because it no longer depends completely on what is happening outside. Inner peace does not mean life becomes free from difficulty. Challenges will always exist because change is part of life. But when peace exists within, challenges do not immediately destroy emotional stability. The mind remains flexible, the heart remains patient, awareness remains clear. Instead of reacting with panic or frustration, the mind responds with understanding and calm observation. Many people search for peace in achievements, believing that reaching certain goals will finally bring satisfaction. Achievements can create moments of happiness, but the feeling often fades quickly because the mind begins searching for the next achievement. This creates an endless pursuit where peace always feels slightly out of reach. The mind becomes conditioned to believe that peace exists somewhere ahead rather than somewhere within. True peace begins when the mind stops constantly chasing something external to feel complete. It begins when you recognize that calmness is not created by perfect circumstances, but by balanced awareness. When awareness becomes steady, peace naturally follows. Inner peace grows when you accept that life includes both pleasant and unpleasant experiences. Many people resist discomfort strongly, believing that every uncomfortable moment must immediately disappear. This resistance creates tension because discomfort is a natural part of growth. When the mind stops fighting every small difficulty, emotional pressure begins to reduce. Acceptance does not mean liking every situation. Acceptance means understanding that some experiences are part of the natural movement of life. This understanding prevents small difficulties from becoming large emotional burdens. Instead of asking why challenges exist, the mind begins asking how to respond wisely. Another important aspect of inner peace is self-relationship. Many people speak to themselves with constant criticism. They focus on mistakes repeatedly. They remind themselves of past failures frequently. This internal dialogue creates pressure because the mind never feels allowed to rest. When self-talk becomes more patient and compassionate, emotional balance improves. A peaceful mind understands that growth requires time. Mistakes become opportunities to learn rather than reasons for harsh judgment. Progress becomes more important than perfection. This perspective creates emotional space where improvement can happen without fear. Inner peace also grows when expectations become balanced. Expectations are natural, but unrealistic expectations create continuous disappointment. Expecting life to always move smoothly creates frustration when challenges appear. Expecting people to always behave perfectly creates tension in relationships. Balanced expectations allow flexibility because they recognize that imperfections are part of life. Gratitude strengthens inner peace because it shifts attention toward what is present rather than constantly focusing on what is missing. The mind often becomes restless when it continuously searches for something more. But when attention recognizes existing blessings, emotional pressure reduces. Gratitude does not ignore challenges. but it prevents challenges from overshadowing everything else. Peace also grows when comparison decreases. Constant comparison creates the feeling that something is always lacking. Someone always appears more successful, more recognized, or more advanced. But comparison creates artificial pressure because every individual follows a different path. Inner peace becomes possible when self-worth is not measured by external competition. Mindfulness strengthens the ability to remain present. Many worries exist in imagined futures. Many regrets exist in remembered pasts. But the present moment often contains more stability than the mind assumes. When awareness returns to the present, unnecessary mental pressure decreases. The mind no longer needs to solve every future possibility or revisit every past experience. Inner peace develops gradually through repeated awareness. It grows stronger when the mind gently returns to balance again and again. Each time you release unnecessary worry, peace becomes slightly stronger. Each time you accept imperfection, peace becomes slightly deeper. Each time you respond calmly rather than react impulsively, peace becomes more stable. A peaceful mind does not become emotionless. Emotions still exist, but they no longer control every decision. Feelings still appear, but they no longer dominate awareness completely. There is space between emotion and reaction. In that space, wisdom can appear. Inner peace creates resilience because emotional stability does not disappear immediately during difficulty. Instead of feeling completely overwhelmed, the mind remains capable of reflection. This ability to remain calm during challenge creates confidence because you begin to trust your capacity to handle uncertainty. When peace comes from within, external validation becomes less necessary. Praise becomes pleasant, but not essential. Criticism becomes informative, but not destructive. Opinions become perspectives rather than definitions of self-worth. This independence creates emotional freedom because identity is no longer controlled by external judgment. Another important element of inner peace is letting go of constant urgency. Modern life often creates the feeling that everything must happen quickly. People feel pressure to achieve fast results, fast improvement, and fast certainty. But peace grows slowly. Understanding deepens gradually. Emotional balance develops through consistent awareness over time. Patience supports inner peace because it removes unnecessary pressure. When patience becomes natural, progress feels more comfortable. The mind becomes less frustrated by gradual improvement. Growth becomes sustainable rather than stressful. Inner peace also develops when you recognize that not every thought needs to be followed. Thoughts appear continuously, but awareness can choose which thoughts deserve attention. Some thoughts create clarity, other thoughts create confusion. Choosing not to engage with every negative thought reduces unnecessary emotional disturbance. The mind becomes calmer when attention becomes intentional. Instead of allowing every external situation to influence emotional state, attention becomes guided by awareness. This guidance creates stability because emotional direction becomes more conscious. True peace also grows when you release the need to control how life unfolds perfectly. Life includes uncertainty, but uncertainty does not always create suffering. Suffering often comes from resisting uncertainty strongly. When uncertainty becomes accepted as part of life, emotional pressure reduces. Inner peace is not something distant or unreachable. It is present quietly beneath layers of overthinking, comparison, fear, and unrealistic expectation. When these layers gradually become lighter, peace naturally appears. Peace does not need to be forced. It only needs to be uncovered. A deeply peaceful person does not depend completely on external conditions to feel stable. They appreciate positive experiences, but they do not feel destroyed by temporary difficulties. They remain open to change, yet grounded in awareness. Their calmness does not come from perfect control, but from understanding the nature of life. When peace comes from within, external noise loses its ability to disturb deeply. Situations may still require attention, but they do not control emotional balance completely. Challenges may still appear, but they do not remove the foundation of stability. True freedom begins when your peace becomes independent of constant external approval. When your calmness does not disappear during uncertainty. When your sense of worth does not depend on comparison. When your awareness remains steady, even when circumstances change. Inner peace becomes a quiet strength that supports every aspect of life. It improves relationships because communication becomes calmer. It improves decisions because thinking becomes clearer. It improves emotional health because reactions become balanced. When peace lives within you, life becomes easier to navigate. You move through change with patience. You respond to difficulty with wisdom. You experience success with humility. You experience uncertainty with courage. True peace comes from within because the mind becomes less dependent on temporary conditions. When peace is internal, it becomes stable. When peace is stable, life becomes lighter. When life becomes lighter, awareness becomes clearer. And when awareness becomes clear, you begin to realize that the peace you were searching for was always quietly waiting inside you. Detachment is not about becoming distant from life. It is about becoming free within life. It is about caring without losing your peace, loving without losing your balance, living without being controlled by every change around you. When you detach deeply, you stop chasing everything and start understanding everything. You stop fearing loss and start discovering inner strength. You stop depending on the world for peace and begin creating peace within yourself. Remember, the strongest mind is not the one that controls everything. It is the one that remains calm when everything is uncertain. Protect your peace. Guard your energy. Strengthen your awareness. And slowly, you will reach a beautiful state where nothing can disturb your mind, because your peace no longer depends on anything temporary. True freedom begins the moment your happiness comes from within. May your mind become still. May your heart become light. And may your peace remain unshaken.